You can't keep using tools of oppression and expect to raise free people.
Finally, damn it. Episode 100. Yes. Welcome to another episode of Fear of the Free Child podcast. I'm Akila, and as I mentioned before, I am co-hosting this one with Kris Richards, my baby daddy.
Yes. All those.
Welcome to the podcast again.
Thank you.
This episode is so exciting for me. Y'all know that a part of the excitement is because I'll be done for the season, but also it's going to give me an opportunity to do this thing that has been sitting in my belly and in my mind for months now, which is the first 100, right? So to be able to do so much more with the conversations and the resources that have come out of people lending their time and their energy for these first 100 episodes. I am so grateful. And I'm also continually getting messages from people about how these first 99, I guess I should say, episodes have been helpful for people. And in my mind, I'm like, that's awesome because they've been helpful for me too. But I want to do so much more, and there can be so much more done. And I want to talk about that a little bit. So first, though, I want to thank our newest patrons, Amy and Michelle. Thank you so much for becoming supporters of the podcast over at patreon.com/Akila. I know that there are a lot of people who are still listening to the podcast now and just getting to like episode 5 or 6 or doing it like listening, not necessarily in order and all of this. So know that even though we will be on break after this episode as season 3 ends, but please still support the podcast through Patreon if you can, because on Patreon, especially now that I won't be producing every week, I have a lot more space and time to engage folks, to maybe do some video chats impromptu, to answer questions, to just be in the mix. So yeah, Amy and Michelle, thank you so much for being patrons of the podcast. And if you're feeling it as you're listening to this, anybody within earshot, patreon.com/Akila. Check it out. A lot of the posts there are open to the public, but most of them are private because that's our private space. So come through for as little as $1 a month or as much as $1,000 a month. Do what you can. So yeah, so Kris and I are back in Joburg.
Yes, we are.
Yes, super, super excited. It's our second night here, and it feels wonderful to be able to close out season 3 being on African soil. It was such an important goal for us for so many years, even before we had the girls and all of that.
Right.
Yes, and so it's nice to be able to do it. And I feel now like we're inviting you into the space as well, as we're back here another year. It's the second night, and just feeling so inspired and motivated by some of the things I'm seeing around me and some of the things that are also coming up. Here in October 20th and 21st, is the Reimagine Learning Conference. It's an unschooling type space that Zakia Ismail, a good friend of ours, organizes each year. I think this is just the second year actually. And they do like an unschooling camp or something like that. Yeah, that they've been doing for some time. So that's happening at the African Leadership Academy, October 20th and 21st. The link for that will be on the show notes page. I am so excited to be among amazing people. There are 4 of us who are the primary speakers, but then there are these open sessions where anyone can be in a position to offer what they're doing, to facilitate, to share. That's the part that I'm really most excited about. We didn't get to attend the conference last year, but we did get to hang out with Zakia and Ahmed and their family and all those other folks. What do you think the conference is going to bring this year? Or I should say, why should people figure out how to get to it this year, you think?
The people that are coming to speak, and just the vibe. It's good to be around people that maybe not everybody gets it all the way, but they're in a space where they recognize the need for it, Good things happen when people come together with loose ideas and things like that, and can build together and kind of knock down some myths and things like that. It's a good opportunity. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So
I dig that for sure. And that's that whole idea of allowing structure to emerge, from just like shared feelings and ideas and exploration, just allowing that to emerge. So I'm really excited that Zakiya understands that, as you say, gets it, and is willing to facilitate that space, because I've been in her company and Ahmed's company, Zakiya's husband, quite a bit, and they definitely have such an understanding of what it means to raise free people. I mean, their children, one child is an adult, or one person, one of their kids, it'll always be their children, right? One's an adult, and then another one is just about there, and another one's 11. So they've had so much practice doing the work, and also facilitating it by just doing a lot of the gatherings that they do around South Africa. And I'm super excited to be in the space with them. Man, if I would take the whole episode if I talked to you about some of the other speakers that are going to be there too, especially Bio. That's somebody who I'm on his email list, really dig his work. Everything that he writes, I have to process it for 2 days, and much joy. Teresa is going to be there, who wrote Parenting for Social Change, which is a book that just really inspired me so much on my unschooling journey. Kaolin, who I don't know a lot about, but just knowing Zakiya, if she's in the mix, then it's a good thing.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about that space.
Something else I'm interested in is concepts and ideas like this. It isn't a monolith. People tend to think that unschooling or deschooling or any other name that you want to throw at the idea that children, people in general, should be free. They can think for themselves. They can grow for themselves. They don't need to be made to grow. A conference like this with these different types of people that are on different, not only in different levels of the journey, but also in different paths to the same goal, it's good because it makes people realize that they don't have to show up in one way. They can show up however they want to show up and just get different perspectives. That's what I'm looking forward to, are the different ways people get to the same place.
That's exactly what all of the work is about, right? That's one of the things that I really appreciate about being a part of the Alliance for Self-Directed Education, right? It isn't this idea that we all need to show up in the same way to get it. Even when that term get it, whatever the it is going to be dependent on you, your children, if you have children, the people in your world, basically. There are some underlying themes, obviously, trusting children, understanding how learning works, believing that people have the right to be free no matter what age they are, and all these other ways that people are, phases in their lives or intersections of their thing.
Even digging into freedom itself. What does freedom mean? Not a lot of people even took the time to think about what freedom means. They just know it's a word.
Yeah.
And they know the people attached to the word freedom, but they don't actually know freedom for themselves.
That's so true. One of the things that I've realized on my own deschooling and unschooling journey is that freedom is scary. Mm-hmm. It feels too vast. Remember when we went to, you know exactly where I'm going, right? So one year in Jamaica, we went deep sea diving, and Kris actually went deep sea fishing. So the guys took us out, the fishermen took us out way out there. Mm-hmm. And then when I got, see the shore. So that was the first thing, right? Yeah. As much as I love water, as mermaid as I am, when we got to a certain point out, I started feeling anxiety, right? Mm-hmm. That's fine. The whole idea of is it safe? We were on a little ass boat, right. All of that. Our girls were with us. Marley and Sage were with us. Mm-hmm. But when I got off, right, and went down into the water, and it's not even I went way, way deep, but I went far enough down, and I looked around, and the shit looked like I was looking up at the sky, but it was so vast, right? Yeah. And I could be excited about that and be wow, and know that I'm safe. There's so many people around here who are professional divers, right there, literally right there, to keep us safe and all of that. Mm-hmm. But that freedom, that vastness was scary. Yeah. And I think that happens for a lot of us when we really go into this work of raising free people. Not that first idea of taking your kid out of school. Of course, that's scary too, because again, it starts to get vast. If somebody's not reeling this thing in, what can it look like? But the more free you become, right? Or the more freedom you have access to. Mm-hmm. Sometimes that can feel really scary. And that's why things like this conference and some of the other things we'll talk about in this episode, or some of the things we've talked about in the past, are so important. Being in community with other people, whatever community looks like for you, is so important, because you get to do exactly what you said, to define freedom, to look at the barriers to it, including the fears associated with it, and to customize it to define it for yourself and to customize it so that your actions can go with this belief that you have. Yeah.
It's the only way it can. Freedom is a personal thing. Yeah.
It is. And that's what's beautiful. It is personal and it's communal, right?
Yes.
Because, but it has to be personal first.
Yeah.
Make sure you go to the show notes page, which is raisingfreepeople.com/100. So you'll get the link to that and some details about the conference. So if you can make it, you need to come through. If it's even like slightly possible, you want to figure it out. Yeah. So much is going to happen. So much is already happening. And to do it here on African soil, oh my goodness, with people who have been practicing the work in various ways. Mm-hmm. Oh man. Not to mention the food, right?
It's always the food.
So that is happening, before I go off on a tangent, October 20th and 21st of this year. And I also want to touch on some other Octobertunities. There are 3 webinars, right? One is really an intensive and 2 are webinars that are happening this October. The first one is Parenting Patois, which you are listening to this on International Podcast Day, which is, today is the 30th. Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know when you're listening to this, but this is when it was published. And this is also the last official day, even though I'd said the 28th. It's fine. Some folks ask for more time. I've had to ask for more time to get my money and my mind right to do things. So today is the last day to register for Parenting Patois. It's going to be really wonderful. It is where we get to talk about what it means to raise free people, coming from how we got to the type of parenting that we do now, which is really oppression and fear-based, and some strategies and ideas and feelings around how we can go towards something that's more partnership-centered. Mm-hmm. So that is the focus. So we will be in a space where you'll be listening to audio mostly, but there will also be video and there'll be PDFs that you can download. And you will get those. They open on October 1st, yeah. And then you will have access to it all October long. We will be able to talk to each other in the comments. I'm going to be doing some impromptu video meetups or teleconference, depending on what y'all want, for folks who registered for Parenting Patois. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't yet, you should check out that. And the link for that, of course, is going to be on the show notes page as well. If you're following me on Instagram, which is definitely the social media platform that I really love, Instagram is where I'm engaged the most. The links are there too on my Instagram bio at Fair of the Free Child. All right. So Parenting Patois is coming up October 1st. The other one, I'm so excited about this one too. This is one that I'm doing in collaboration with Asia Rutledge, and it's called Deschooling Your Way to a Fulfilled Life. 2 days of intensive clarity and liberation training towards your most urgent lifestyle transition. So this one is exclusively for women and femmes in a space of transition, like either going from the you that you've been over to the one that you are ready to be now, or the you that you've been showing up as over to the one that you know you've always been, right? So we're talking about some of the life phases that cause us to be stuck or to have some level of clarity but not know how to strategize around that clarity, or to just focus on the mindset shift because you understand this idea of being free and being yourself and being authentic. You get it in theory, there's resonance, but you find that you just keep going back to the old patterns. And there's a reason for that. It's not because you're broken, and it's not because you just don't know how to do it right. It's just because you don't have certain tools. And also, a lot of us don't have community, because the people in our immediate circles, the ones we can reach out and touch, the ones that it's easy for us to pick up the phone and call, they're still trying to figure out like why we won't settle into this thing. Why are you trying to leave your good job? Why are you trying to take your kid out of school? Why do you want to travel? Why do you want to do all of these things? And those are a part of what pull you back, to that way that you've been groomed to show up. So deschooling your way is going to really create community and strategy around what it means to be authentic and to allow yourself to transition. So we're only looking for women and femmes who feel the urgent need to transition. And this one is not a webinar It is on October 6th and 7th of this year. And October 6th, what we're going to do is a 4-hour meetup. So we'll be meeting through video on Zoom. Saturday is a group meetup. And then on Sunday, we're going to be doing one-on-ones. Asia is earlier in her unschooling and just like freedom journey. So together we'll be able to connect and relate to women and femmes who are either just getting started around the mindset shift or some aspect of the transition, all the way over to women and femmes who are much further into it. But at that stage, they're needing some resources and some support around settling into that shift. So that's what is coming up October 6th and 7th. And that is going to be on the show notes page, that direct link. And it is also on my Instagram. Then on October 26th, Dr. Sunjata and I are going to be co-facilitating how to focus on learning. So this is the one that's like the people in your family, the other adults who are like, why would you pull our kid out of school? Why would you pull my grandbaby out of school? Why are you even considering this thing? What y'all doing? How are they going to get into college? What about math? Blah, 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 blah. This is a resource that you can gift to them or direct them to so that they can leave your ass alone, so that they can stop drilling your kid about freaking multiplication tables or whatever the hell. So it's going to offer them the space to understand self-directed education. We're going to provide them with resources that they basically things that keep them busy in a good way. And if you're one of the people who need to be kept busy, come holler at this webinar, please. Do it. Because we know what it's like to have that stress of doing the work and doing the shift and trying to be there for our children and for ourselves, and also nurturing the people whom we love, who are part of our support system, who don't get it. We've been fortunate. Nobody's been like adamant asshole about what we do with our daughters. But I know many people, when I did the last Raising Free People workshop, we had folks in that mix who that was their deepest frustration. The fact that as an adult raising a child, your parent who's a part of your support system doesn't get it, and they're either cutting off support or making it really difficult for your child. We can sometimes isolate ourselves because of the frustration of people not understanding. Or if you run some sort of learning center and the parents, they still have a lot of basic myths twisted. So this is for those people. And if you're one of those people, this is a good thing. Don't take it as shade when I say that you're frustrating. It is frustrating, and it's okay and important that you know that. And here is something that Dr. Sunjata and I are offering for you to go from the space of frustration to information and clarity and ultimately support. Because this is about supporting the self-directed child. And this is going to be a resource to help you to understand how you can do that. This one is going to be available long term. So if you register for it and it starts October 26th, it's not a live thing. So everything will be pre-recorded. So once you buy it, you'll have access to it forever.
It also sounds like it would be helpful for people that are on the fence, or people that are not really on the fence, but they have a innate feeling about what it is and why it's important, but they're still battling the alternative. They know the path that was blazed for children to follow and to go down, college, just because, not necessarily because you need it for what you want to do when you're of age, quote unquote, or whatever. So it might be good for people as well to kind of shore up their belief system and have information about education and how learning actually happens, strengthen that bond. And some people actually need this for themselves for when they talk to other people. True. You know, so
that's what's up.
There's that bit of space between what you know they understand and what they need to understand to get on the same page with you and your child or whoever it is that you're, this also would help, I think.
Yeah, that's true. Learning evolves, right? So what you discovered, especially in this beautiful, messy thing of self-directed education, just like any other important life experience, the shit is complicated, right? It's nuanced. And so doing something like this with someone like Dr. Sundiata, who, by the way, is formerly Scott Speed. He's been on this podcast a few times. He is someone who started a self-directed education center, GROW, in Metro Atlanta. He is a parent. He is someone who is living the work. He's someone who comes from a very academic background and family and did his own transition, his own deschooling journey, and is adamant, beautifully adamant, that self-directed education is one of the primary solutions to a lot of the things that are happening, not just in education, but in the world in terms of capitalism, in terms of the way that we other people. And it's super dope because Sundiata and I don't have the same ideas about a lot of things, which is another beautiful thing for you to experience. You can see people who have differences in some fundamental things who still share such a deep understanding and value of self-directed education that we have worked together and will continue to work together, because that's one of the deschooling tools too. This one, how to focus on learning, is going to be really dope for those sort of things. And then specifically too for people who run learning centers. It's a resource that you can offer to parents, especially because this one is once you buy it, you have it forever. Yeah. So we're doing it at the individual level. And then also you can buy it for a group. There's no cap on it. So if you pay that fee for the group license, I guess I can call it a license. That word is weird for it. As many people as you want to be part of it will have access, and they will also have lifetime access to it as well. So if you want to do it for a community, it's something that you could sit with a group of people in whatever group you have, whether it's virtual or in person, and watch it together, listen to it together, and then expound upon that in whatever ways make sense for you and the people that you're looking to help bring clarity to, especially if that person is you. So those are the 3 Octobertunities that are happening. If you have any questions about any of them, y'all know the deal. Just voice memo on the site. You know, I love that. Or you can DM me on Instagram, or worst case scenario, Facebook. I probably won't get it in a couple days if you do it on Facebook, but if you do it on IG, I'm pretty sure I'll see it that day. And then in November, my New York peoples, I'm going to be in New York right quick for like 3 days, because there's a Festival Albertine, the French embassy, I think, puts on this festival each year. And this year, what they do is they talk about important topics in the world and the ways that people are affecting change in those areas in ways that can really make the world different in terms of people being able to be who they are, and in terms of oppression being something that isn't just like the standard operating procedure that you have to figure out how to get around. So it's called Festival Albertine. I'm going to put the link on the show notes page, and I'm going to be in New York November 2nd, I think, to the 4th, like just like 5 seconds to speak about self-directed education there. So if there's something happening in New York in that short block of time, November 2nd through the 4th, holla at me, something that I should go to or at least message the person about. Whew. And I'm really excited about that, even though I'm not excited about traveling all the way back to the US 22 seconds after we got here. Right. Yeah. The curators in the past have been Ta-Nehisi Coates and Roxanne Gay, 2 people that I deeply appreciate, and I'm looking forward to it. And then that second week in November, Marley and I get to facilitate a training again, this time in Mpumalanga at another Agile Learning Center. So we'll be doing a training there on self-directed education. And we are so excited because, one, we get to go back to Mpumalanga to explore more of it and just spreading the work, you know, helping people to feel a sense of clarity and to have some tools and resources for this work of raising free people.
And being themselves. That seems to be the thread that binds all the things you're doing. It's very much about people not presenting, not forcing their children to present, right? Being yourself and taking on all of that, what that means, taking on the world as yourself and not as a carbon clone of something else or someone else that society believes you should be.
Authentic self-expression. You know, right now, self-expression is such a radical thing, right? That's the work that's what I used to call my work, radical self-expression. And I still very much believe in that principle. Raising free people is what resonates most now. That's what I've been guided to. But all of it is really about radical self-expression. And I look forward to the day when it's just regular self-expression, that it's not a radical idea. to just be who you are, to show up in the world in a way that doesn't even feel sometimes that you have to take it on, but that you just get to be in it. And that in those moments when you do need to take it on, you do it as you, and that you're clear about who you even is. You know, who is you? That's like the question. Like, seriously, do you know you?
Right.
And that's exactly going back to what you were talking about before, babe, about freedom. Knowing what that is for you, not for someone else. Freedom could mean having a certain job so you can live in a certain place and drive a certain car. That's fine if that's your idea of freedom. The problem is we all have been groomed to see freedom as this one set of things that's like, that shit don't feel like freedom to me.
That's somebody else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, you're right that the thread is really about being yourself and making sure that you are not in the way of young people being themselves solely because you happen to be in the position of power as the adult in their lives.
And with that power, you should be making space. That's what that power is supposed to look like. You should be clearing the grounds for that. They always use the term of a seed. The child is a seed that you plant, and that the power that you have should be clearing space for that seed to grow. It shouldn't be trying to force it into a corner and say, that's where I want you to grow. Make the space.
Yes.
And absolutely. You can't make the space if you're not even aware of how you work. You're still working for someone else. You're being someone else.
When Kris is saying working for someone else, he's not talking about like in that literal sense of having a job where you have a manager. We're talking about working for someone else in terms of your agenda. You don't even realize that you're carrying out someone else's agenda when you do what you do. That's one of the things I talk about a lot on this podcast, how I realized that I was an extension of the same educational system that I didn't even believe in or value.
You're grooming your child for someone else. That's what I meant. Actively grooming your child to be valuable for someone else.
Yeah. This is why this work is so important for you to be doing yourself, for you to be reflecting on the things that you do, for you to separate your agenda from what you're seeing in a young person. How much are you focused on comparing what you think they should be doing to what they're actually doing? And how much energy are you putting into what you're seeing about them? Again, it's really messy because sometimes all you're seeing from them is what they want you to see because it's not safe to be yourself. You know that, listening to that, right? Like we know that. And so for a young person, even more so, and you probably remember that shit, you know how you performed. So those sort of things, it makes it tricky because you don't know if you're seeing that them. Also, who you see is so influenced by how other adults see them. So much of our parenting and caregiving for young people is arranged and oriented based on how other adults view that child. Like, do you have control over that kid in your life? You know, you don't even realize that you have that agenda going until you take the time to do that self-reflective work. That's why unschooling and deschooling is so not just about education or whether the pinna go school or don't go school. It's not just that. It's so much more than that. It is who are you? Who are you working for? Whose agenda are you following subconsciously even or consciously? And is that in alignment with the type of relationship that you're looking to build with that young person or the type of relationship you want to embody with yourself, right, you know, and the self you're becoming? And I feel like that work is happening in so many different spaces. We spent almost a month in California in August, and we spent time in a few different communities around Cali. We got to be with various organizers and see how they were doing that work. Priscilla Luna, Tiffany Sandoval, Inez. I'm about to start saying all their names now. How they collaborated. That's something I feel is really missing in this space, or maybe I just don't see it enough. Maybe it's not missing and I just don't know. But we need to collaborate more. This thing can feel like such an isolation chamber. You know, when you first make this decision, we definitely experience that too. It's like us and our kids against the world as unschoolers. And then you shift out of that in some instances, but many people have not. And I get why, because there's so much around you affirming the same foolishness that you realize you need to get out of. But another part of it too is that it's so beautiful that they have different focuses, but they collaborate, they work together, they figure it out together. As much as Inez might have a specific focus, Tiffany might have a specific focus, Priscilla, Genesis, a lot of these various women and femmes who are doing the work, they know how to collaborate. They know the importance of getting together to figure out the things and to support each other, and that their children can be around each other too, to be around other people who are weird like their family is weird. You know, I was so inspired by that.
That's too. Another thing that kind of bind those people that I met, that I noticed, is that they all did the work internally, like themselves. It's clear. They took the time to realize how they actually feel about a thing and how that affects their behavior, and how it affects their relationship with other people, and how it affects their relationship with the community, which is why how they collaborate is so impressive. The ego isn't a part of the conversation, you know?
When it is, they're so honest about it, right?
Right.
They talk about how complicated it is when you are realizing, because as you said, they did the work. So when ego shows up, as it will, they recognize it and they're able to see and say, right? Not just see it and write the shit in your journal, but to talk to each other about it. It was really beautiful. Yeah.
When everybody is open and honest with who they are and how they view what happened with another person, it seems like it's easier for them to kind of call each other out on stuff and say, this is where I was and this is how I was behaving. Or, you know, I really took it as you were being this way. Yeah. I think I remember Tiffany was talking about that in an instance. She was saying, like, it took her a minute to understand that, hey, this other person, they're not coming at me. It's really just my perception. And how do I fix that? Yes. I talk to the person open and honestly. Repeatedly. Yes. And when they say what they say, I take them at their word, because it's their word and I have no reason not to, you know?
And that's what we're talking about when I say having the tools for the work, because you can have all the intention in intention land. And oftentimes intention is a good starting point because it will allow space for the possibility of that emergent structure and collaboration. But you need tools. You absolutely need those personal leadership and personal development tools that will help you to not personalize a thing in a way that stops you from being in community with someone else, or a way that you can say, yep, I definitely don't want to be in community with this person. And to be able to say that, act upon that, and not be ridden with guilt and frustration and anger and all of these things as a result of it. It gives you the capacity to really lead yourself. And when you can do that, it makes it a lot easier to organize, as I'm learning. And I feel really fortunate that my guides, my ancestors, my daughters, like the people in my community, have definitely held me accountable and have helped me to do a lot of that personal work before I got to this point here where I'm able to facilitate these workshops and conversations, because it's like, here's our shared goal. If something is in the way of the goal, obviously we're going to need to work through this thing. When that's the focus, it's a very different set of conversations.
Absolutely.
So we'll definitely be back in California. Man, shout out to Genesis, Lori. Her and Tiffany really held a lot of space for us, quite literally. And then also in terms of how they introduced us to certain people and spaces, and it was really soul feeding for all of us. One of the major takeaways from it is that I will now be offering more of my facilitation work in that same communal setting, in the way that Priscilla and Lori put together that organizers breakfast, and then also after that, the gathering that we had.
The event itself was beautiful. It was good to see a lot of different families, and not just immediate families, but bigger circle families, grandmothers and fathers were there. Yeah, it was cool. Yeah,
it really was. Yeah. I want to facilitate more like that. So some of the things that I'm working on for next year, I've had some people who run schools and some people who run community organizations reach out to have me come speak at their event. And I'm like, yeah, okay, here's what I'm thinking. Collaborate. Who else in your community or a neighboring city or town or whatever is also doing this work? Can y'all get together? You know, so that when I'm there, I'm talking to as many different groups of people about this work, and also even before I get there, so that I can be in communication with folks, so I can be really clear about what are the needs, what are the wants. I don't want to get up there talking about one thing if there's something else that needs to be discussed. And can we have food in the mix? Because that's how Black folks do. Just people of color in general. We like to have that aspect in the mix, which is really dope. Just being able to do it in that way where people are collaborating to say, let's bring someone here who's willing to facilitate. And as you said, have the conversations that sometimes it's hard to have solo. You can invite people over to be able to explain this thing by someone who is really experienced and comfortable talking about it a bunch of different ways. It was just great. It didn't feel like I was just like at a thing doing a talk. Sometimes that's necessary too. Some spaces call for that. But it just felt like it was like a barbecue. Like we all got together and we were talking about, instead of a sport, we were talking about this major lifestyle work that is shifting the fucking world.
Yeah. I'd love to see that in people's living rooms. Bring in people that you don't necessarily connect with every day, but you share a common understanding or a common belief, and everybody come together and talk about it, get it out, and talk about your ideas, and not make it a debate. Tends to happen a lot too when people get together. That it becomes a I'm right, you're not. But that was not at all. I didn't have that experience at all there. People had their beliefs and their understanding. They weren't afraid to voice them, which was great.
Yes.
And you had other people that maybe were on the other side of that, but they took the time to listen, and then they put in their piece, and you're like, hey, okay, there's a shift there. Maybe I'm looking at it from a weird lens. Let me shift my perspective a little.
Yes.
That's the thing that I'm saying was beautiful like that, because I saw that happen by the way people ask questions and the way that they kind of shifted their answer to say, you know what? Yeah, I was bugging on that part, but I get where you're coming from. And maybe now this is why I need to shift in this direction. Yeah. That type of thing, it's nice to see, because it doesn't mean that somebody's winning. It just means that people are growing. Yes. And they're growing together in a safe space.
It's exactly that. Am I going to be focused on being right or winning it, as you said, or am I looking for a solution here? Because me winning is a result, not a solution. Very much so in the work that we're talking about. You're listening to this podcast, so you know what I mean by this work, right? This work of raising free people. We have to understand how to be more dialogue-centered. We did see a lot of that happening, and we saw a transformation just in that short time. Were you standing by me when that grandma came up to me? It was like, she's going to apologize. No, I think, were you?
Yeah, you told me about it.
Okay, it was the girls who were standing next to me, right, because I went to the bathroom. She said, she came up to me and gave me the biggest hug, and she said, I owe my children an apology, because I came from that old school mentality, and I just bought this curriculum for my grandchildren. I'm going to throw it out. She said, I bought all these. I'm going to throw it out, because how am I buy a curriculum and I don't even know what they're in? Like, she straight up shifted. Mm-hmm. I was so moved by that. There was this other dude who was talking about how he was getting into trouble constantly in school, right? Like, that was his pattern. That was his family pattern. As a matter of fact, he was like tattooed up, all these ideas around like who he is, how he shows up in the world. But because he and his wife are deschooling minded and have learned how to not connect with like working for someone in that sense of working for the agenda, he's saying that he did so poorly in school. I don't think he finished high school, if I recall correctly, but he runs his own business now, doing something that he started doing as a result of like community service or something like that. And then there's so many other people with whom he went to school who are now like just stuck and unhappy. Mm-hmm. Those were the conversations that were happening in that moment. People who were talking about, should I be talking to my child about this thing now? Like, we really went in that space of time, in that group, just sitting out there, eating, chatting, sweating. It was so wonderful. So if you, really feel like the work that I do, the way that I do it, can be useful for your community, or even if you feel like it's useful for you, don't just think about, oh, I don't have the money, or we don't have a venue, or all of these typical things. Think about collaboration. Think about who else around you would be interested too, or somebody that you think would benefit from it, and talk about that shit. Figure out how to do it together, because I'm definitely flexible with like how I end up there. So, Yeah, that was one of the biggest takeaways for me. And I so appreciate that you were there too, because you got to see it and offer perspective, especially as a father and as a male, because there were some fathers there as well, quite a few. And I know that's something that at the conference we were at in San Jose and then going to Inglewood for that gathering, a lot of people were so happy to see you there and to hear your voice, to hear you talking.
Yeah, which was surprising. I didn't realize it was so important. I recognized that a lot of this, the movement behind education and treating children as equals, really being pushed by women. And even though men are, in some ways it sounds weird, but complicit, it's not really involved in a sense like that, but complicit with the idea. They don't allow themselves to consider what that looks like. So, for instance, one of the guys that I was talking to at the Inglewood thing, he was making that statement, like he didn't connect the idea that he could operate the same way that his wife was, because his wife was the one that was more involved with taking the son wherever it was that he needed to go to explore and to get into his thing. He was busy working or busy doing something else. He didn't connect to the idea that it's a mindset, just like parenting. Things are going to come up, and how you approach the thing is the thing. It's, am I in the mindset of, you deserve autonomy just like I have autonomy. My job isn't to hold your hand through your life. My job is to help and make sure that you have what you need to get where you need to go. And sometimes, especially to be where you are now. But again, a part of that is the schoolish mindset. Part of the schoolish mindset is boys do certain things, girls do certain things. Boys and girls, their relationship is not the same. They're taught that you are different. After a certain age, you're not supposed to be touching each other. That stuff has an effect when you get older. You feel disconnected from certain emotions or certain ways of approaching a thing. You know, it's difficult for some men to talk to daughters. It's difficult for some men to even deal with sons, because their approach is, you deal with sons with aggression. They need to know who the man of the house is. There's undercurrents of that. Yeah. You know, the only person raising your voice in the house is the father. It shouldn't be anyone else. That is a mindset that I grew up with, you know? So it was good to see that barrier being broken as well. Men coming and saying, I have my thoughts on this. This is my input. It was good to see that, and it was good to see the varying perspectives. All in all, I think that's the thing. It's definitely, recently, it's very much been a shift to femininity right now. A lot of things are happening, and society is beginning to see women, like actually see women. Some men feel threatened that seeing women means that you're not going to see men. There's going to be a power struggle until you realize, then what? I have the power, now what? I'm going to oppress you like you oppress me because I need to get back at you. Nobody wins in that scenario, especially a child. I'm looking forward to the evening out and people treating people as people and not as labels.
Exactly. So right back again to what you said about freedom, right? Because that's such a huge part of freedom, how you get to be, whether you get to be, and how you get to shift, like not being one thing. So many of us as adults, so much of the hard work for us is like, oh, if I transition to being this way, whether that is like my gender expression or whether it's where I work or how I live, how I look in any way, where I live, any of those things. So much of the concern is like, yeah, but people are so used to me in this way. How will people accept, or will people accept this thing? So this work of raising free people also includes freeing yourself. And when we talk about these dynamics, I'm so glad you brought that up about women and femmes now being seen. And this idea that some men feel threatened by that, because that's something we deal with in the Black community as well. Like, oh, if you're about this, then you're not about your man. Bitch, please, whatever. Kris and I have these conversations all the time. And I just am so grateful that you are sensible is the term that I use, because I don't think it's something miraculous. I think it's sensible, and that you grew up with an authoritarian parent. So if you can make the shift, it's just another way that I know it's possible. But there's desire and pressure and all these other things. I always say that we, as parents, we speak oppression by training and grooming, and then liberation by desire. You have to want to. So fathers and non-fathers, just men, your voices in this work of raising free people is so important because we are all people. And because you can't have an authentic relationship with a child in your life because you're having to puff up and position because everything says you have to do that and that you're not allowed to have feelings and that you have to show up in a certain way, or that if you realize that you don't want to work this way anymore, you do feel resentful or even jealous that your wife or partner gets to spend more time with the kids and you feel out of the loop or whatever. Freedom means that you can do something about that, and that doing something isn't aggressing your way into a shift, but to feel your way into a shift because you're human.
Right. You're human. People have tendencies. And it's not, I feel like people confuse how they are with how they should be or how they need to be. I don't think the relationship that men have with their families most of the time are based on their actual feelings of family, unless something specific happens to them and they took it there. For instance, if you grew up with a strict father and you were beaten as a young child, you were told to be quiet, until you became of age or whatever, and you became a man, and then all of a sudden, all these things are thrown on you. Along with the title comes responsibilities and expectations, and all these things get thrown on you. I imagine it's the same for a woman, but I can only talk from my perspective. Yeah. So you get all these things thrown on you. You don't really have the time or the space to kind of figure out how you actually feel about family, how you actually feel about raising a child. You just know what you saw. My father did this. So you're either going to react in a space of, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to beat my child. Let's say you take that stance. I'm not going to beat my child. A lot of people stop there. They stop there. It's like, well, I feel like I'm doing better than my dad. I'm not as strict on you as my father was on me. So I'm already ahead of the game. But what about all the other stuff? So if you're going to call that into question, you should call into question what it means to talk to your child about how you feel about something, and not just be, this is what I want. This is how you're going to do it. I'm the father, do what I say. Maybe it's important that you integrate how you feel about the fact that they're doing that. Maybe that's an important thing for them to hear and to see.
Yeah, you talked about that a lot at HSC. That's the Homeschool Association of California conference. In those group settings, and even when we got back to our room each time.
Yeah, it's just coming from a place of personal mastery of yourself. So I can use myself as the example. Growing up, my father, he was very strict at the time. He was very concerned because we're also immigrants. He didn't want me to get into any trouble because I don't have the same rights, or I didn't have the same rights at the time. So he was dealing with a lot of navigating that he was trying to do, and at the same time making sure his family is okay. But I didn't recognize that because he didn't talk about that with me. I just saw the frustration every day. I saw the anger. I saw those things, right? And I didn't have a context for it until I got older. So when I was younger, I said, oh, these are the things. I took notes, mental notes. These are the things I'm not going to do. I'm not going to deal with my children this way. I'm going to try and hear them out and try and be understanding. When I eventually had children, I found myself reverting right back to the same things that he did because I've never been a parent before. And I can only base that off of my previous experience as being a child. So it took me a minute to stop and say, if I'm really serious about being different, I should really consider all the different pieces that are tied to really dig into the things that really bothered me and why it bothered me and what that would look like for me being on the other side of it. That was a process. It continued to be a process. And there's levels of privilege there too, because I had you, someone that I trusted, and someone that trusted me. Not a lot of people have that. I understand that, but I can only talk for where I'm at. And where I'm at was, I recognize that. And I took the time to really dig in.
We've talked about it on this podcast before, this idea of being woke, right? Mm-hmm. I love it. I love the terminology for what it means, what it calls for as well. You are now not willing to just be about like how much money you make. You're recognizing that everything is everything. You're recognizing the connections.
Everything is tied together.
Yes. You're looking at spirituality as not this like weird woo-woo thing, but defining the shit for yourself, connecting to your culture,
Analyzing your beliefs and where they came from. Do
Major
they still make sense?
Deschooling. That's what being woke is a deschooling process, and then unschooling yourself as you recognize, okay, I'm willing to shed this, or I want to actually amplify this thing. So you do that part, but then the wokeness does not extend to your child. As you said, you're like, okay, I won't beat him because I'm woke. Yeah. And that's a good fucking start. Right. Do not hit your children. But what about the rest of it? What about what you're saying? That's the thing. I'd lost my train of thought and tried to play it off. When I was saying that's what you were bringing up a lot at HSC, that with our daughters, how at first you were definitely modeling a lot of the habits and behaviors that you came out of, like we tend to do. But then you realize, like, okay, this is my problem. Like, why am I making this her problem? Or I'm going to express my feelings to her, not in terms of like telling them every single thing in life and offloading your problems or anything like that. Because that's sometimes what people like, oh, I don't want to, like, you know, my mom did that to me and da 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 da. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, just as you said, when you made a decision to not do a thing or to do a thing, communicate with the young human about your feelings, about why you are doing it. And just like with an adult, you might have to have the conversation 11 times before it sinks in, or you realize after the first conversation that this is not the time. It's not landing for them. But what you're doing is humanizing yourself instead of being this role of parent that is like impossible to fucking keep up. And so you take it out on that child. You talked a lot about, like, with Marley, how her personality, right? Yeah.
That's exactly what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Because I remember there was a time I was getting ready to slap her. We're in the bathroom. She was about 6 or 7. And I was really upset. And I took a minute and thought, why was I really upset? And I was really upset. It wasn't because she lied so much. The thing was that she lied to me, the father, the authoritarian. And she didn't do what I said she was supposed to do. And when I realized that that was the part that bothered me the most, that's when I had to look at myself and be like, you know, that's not her problem. That's my problem. And when I realized that, I figured I took a chance. Let me put it that way. I took a chance because I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure how she would receive it. I wasn't sure if I was going to appear weak. I wasn't sure of a lot of things. But what I was sure about was that I'm not going to be the one to lie to her. Right? So I sat her down. I sat on the top of the toilet, got face to face with her. And I was talking. I was like, look, I'm upset that you lied. That's a problem for me. But I also recognize I'm upset that you lied to me, your father. And that's not really your problem that you're lying to me, the person. You shouldn't be lying at all. And I really don't want to hit you, you know? And I don't actually think it's helping you because you're still doing the thing. But here's
You hit her before?
Yeah. I hit her on her hands.
Yeah.
Remember? Yeah.
No, I don't remember that at all. I remember that I've hit her before, you know, like especially the 6 or 7, right? Like that's that age. But I didn't remember that that's something you had done as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hit her on her hand. And okay, so this is a perfect example. So my fix for not being like my father, the authoritarian, was I didn't hit her with a belt. In my mind, I made it make sense to me. And I was like, I'll always hit her with my hand on her hand so that I can feel the same amount of pain that she feels. Right? It sounds all whatever, but come to think of it, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense.
Because you wouldn't feel the same amount of pain that she feels, and it's also still hitting.
Exactly.
That's why we ultimately stopped, because we had that conversation like, wait a minute, if we're safe space and safe space is hitting you, how could we possibly say to them that someone else should not, or that they should not hit someone else, or that they are free? All these things, or that I love you, right? Because people conflate love and fear all the time. Yeah.
So then here she'll be a grown-up woman with memories of her father that loved her hitting her. So all of those things were kind of rolling around in there, and I just, in a moment of craziness, I guess, I told her those things. I was like, look, I don't actually enjoy hitting you. It's not something I want to do, but I'm frustrated. I can't figure out another way to get you to understand why this is such a big deal and why it's important to me that you do not lie. I want to trust you, but I can't if I can't trust what you're saying. And that's not to say that it fixed it immediately, but what it did do is I recognized after that moment we had a deeper relationship. I had a better understanding of how she saw me, and I think she had a better understanding of where I was coming from.
Because you expressed your feelings and not like the byproduct of that feeling, which is hitting. So freedom is not, again, going back to defining freedom for yourself, freedom doesn't mean the freedom to hit my child. Freedom means the freedom to be able to communicate and to be in a relationship with somebody that will possibly nurture a deeper connection, which it in fact did. And we've both had several conversations with Marley and Sage, and they know us actual people, and we are continuing to get to know them actual people, flaws and all in our case. And then when we are frustrated with something and we don't know how to deal with something that they're doing that we're not okay with, we say the shit, and when they are 6 and 7, depending on your kid, because it totally varies just like any other human, they may not get it. But then now at 12 and 14, they get it because we put a different set of things into practice. We changed the culture in our household from domination to partnership. This is why I can do this work so openly and allow it to emerge, because I live the shit in study, in practice, in all these different ways. And I get to see that it is messy and that, as you said, it doesn't like solve a problem right away. Doesn't mean they're going to stop doing this. Things are going to happen.
Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they connect the dots. Sometimes they don't. I mean, she's told me on various occasions that there's things that I've said to her in the moment. And she's like, whatever, Dad. You're just being dad and whatever. And somewhere down the line, she's like, this is what he was talking about. And I get it. And it was easier for her to adapt because it wasn't coming from the person that's supposed to be like the perfect parent.
Yes.
I wasn't acting like I was perfect. As a matter of fact, I told her I wasn't perfect. I told her and I gave her examples and I showed her, look at how I dealt with this situation with you. That's not the best thing to do. I did what was comfortable. I did what I remembered.
And you've apologized.
Of course, apologize to her because that's what she should expect being an adult. If someone did something wrong to you, it's not okay until they apologize, or until you recognize that there was an actual shift.
And it's the same thing with Sage. Different issues or concerns in parenting, in any relationship, that's such an encouraging and motivating feeling. It reminds you that it is okay to be vulnerable together. That it is okay to say what you need and what's happening and to apologize, because that's something that they should expect as people, adults or children at any stage, and to not apologize to like cover some shit up. You say that to them all the time. That's something that took me a lot longer. And in some instances, I'm still like, like don't apologize unless you mean it, right? That's something that resonates with Marley, that's a tool you offered her. A different tool that I offer that seems to resonate with Sage is, the apology is not just about you. Sometimes that other person, they need that. That's a diffuser. It's a starting point to a conversation because you don't necessarily have to apologize for what you said. Sometimes it's about, my intention wasn't for it to make you feel that way. But with Sage, one of the things that I noticed, I think, is partially just like who she is. I mean, her name really makes sense for her. But also the environment, right? The culture that we have cultivated together, the four of us in partnership. She understands like when there's an action, when we do something, Sage looks to the intention or the meaning behind it. She is able to look around things that we saw it so much when they were at Heartwood, an Agile Learning Center in Atlanta. She was able to make room for other people and for herself, managing her own issues and ways or whatever, because she's able to look at, okay, here's what happened, but I bet you that is a result of these things, or I suspect that these are the feelings you were having, or this is why. She sometimes is like Marley's coach, Marley's life coach for real. She's like, Mar, here's what's happening. Here's why people are receiving you in this way. It's amazing. And sometimes I'm like, man, imagine if we continued on that fucked up path, that she would not have been able to either develop or practice, because I think some of that was really just her personality. It wasn't like we didn't do that, but we created an environment that allowed her to practice that skill, to see the benefits of it, and to now use it as a tool for herself, just as Marley is able to reflect in a lot of ways. And I mean, folks saw it. Marley and I have been doing work together now in person and virtually. And people say that they recognize those things, the way that she's able to see and express certain things. Again, some of this is just like how she came out. Like that is not, we didn't build that in them, but we can absolutely nurture a sense of partnership, not in a way that takes away your capacity to parent. You are the parent. You do have a more vast set of experiences and contexts and things like that. So it doesn't take away from parenting. It actually strengthens it because of the same reasons we're talking about. They can recognize things because nobody is forcing them. And then they're able to apply those tools and see how much we are trying and that it's okay for us to be fallible and to make these mistakes. And they recognize where we're coming from, just like we recognize now when they make mistakes.
And us being honest about who we are and what we believe and how we see them. And being honest with them, they recognize the duality in things. They recognize that we can believe this thing, but in this instance, it has to be different because circumstances. It was a hard thing for them to deal with at first, but the more that we did it, be human with them, the more that they get it. And they recognize people aren't, again, back to the monolith thing. That might actually be one of the byproducts of this labeling system that we have in the schooling system. You're either this or you're that. There's no gray. Because if you're gray, now you're being inconsistent. Yeah, we are. Because circumstances matter. Things change. People are complicated. So the world that all these people live in together is going to be complicated.
Necessarily. So the work isn't to try to standardize the shit out of shit.
Right. It's the opposite. It's to recognize that people go through things. Some things some things you don't. But in the end, the result is the result. You can only see the result for what it is, but you don't always know a person's motivation for doing something. So if your approach in dealing with a person is, let me try and understand where you're coming from, because I don't understand this result, and I don't understand how it came after all these different things. Let me get to know you a little better that's when all the labels can fall. Because when you meet a person, you're meeting a person, you're not meeting a label.
Yes, that's been a big part of my ongoing deschooling journey. The less that I won't say you, I'll talk about myself. The less that I label people also is the less that I label myself. The way that you oppress other people is also a way that you oppress yourself. That voice in your head that, like the last episode of Insecure where Issa was like talking to herself and she's like, but you're a failure, blah, 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 saying all these, like those voices in our heads are in part from the people in our lives, especially when we were younger. We are mimicking those voices. We've talked about that on this podcast for sure. That also morphs into your voice. You start to confuse that criticism for your actual voice until it becomes your internal dialogue. That's why I'm so grateful. I'm like, my ancestors like hem my ass up. Our daughters, you oftentimes, just different people in my circle who bring me right back to, that's not going to work right there because I am both and. We get to be whatever we are developing into. And the less I do that to other people is also the less that I do that to myself. Then I feel so much more confident in who I am and the fact that who I am shifts in certain times, like how that me shows up, because it's not really in who I am. It's in the expression of that self, or that I can change my mind, as we've talked about.
It's absolutely necessary to change your mind. That's how you grow. If something isn't changing, it's dead. Argue differently. That's how it is. So we're in a constant flux. And the principles that people talk about when they're like, well, if you don't have your principles, and same thing, circumstances matter. I was just having this conversation earlier on IG with the family in the circle. Chat, yeah, we're talking about Cosby. Here's this guy that all these allegations popped up, but some people didn't believe that he should have been treated so harshly because the Harvey Weinsteins, the whoever else, the other white people that do pretty much the same thing that he did, all they did was lose some money. They're still free. The argument is, why couldn't he be? Well, the fact is, he's not. Yes, it's weird. Yes, it's whatever. He did something wrong. He paid for the thing. Maybe he paid more harshly than the other person. But so what? The end result is that he did something to somebody.
Right. Like, what the fuck are we focused on here?
Right. And then all these other things come into play. Oh, well, he's done so much for us and we should support. Support? That's what I'm saying. So it's like, I understand the idea of not wanting to come off as wishy-washy or not standing firm in any one decision. But when you get new information and that new information doesn't have any effect on what you believe, that's a problem. You really should consider that a problem, because then your principle isn't a principle. It's laziness. You don't want to change. I don't want it to go into the specifics of how you get there, but get there, you know?
Yes. Yes. Oh, y'all. These conversations are supposed to disrupt your regularly scheduled patterns to allow you to grow or to continue to grow, or to shift in some instances, or as we said, to change your fucking mind. And I think conversations like these allow us to be able to address that, because we can commiserate, and that's important. We need to vent, especially to each other as BIPOC folks, but we also need to be working on solutions. We need to be willing to understand that there are multiple solutions and that it is okay to figure out how to collaborate with whoever there's resonance in that particular thing with, to test out a solution and to pivot it over and over again until it makes sense or until it evolves into something different.
Of course. It also means that you have to deal with the idea that someone is going to challenge your perspective. You have to be willing to analyze your own perspective, because you run the risk of being the very same oppressor that the other person. Like you're shifting
Yes.
masters. You're basically saying, "Oh, I get it. I just don't like the way you're mastering. I want to be a better master, or I can be a better master.
Yeah.
And I don't want a master."
Yes.
That part of my definition of freedom is I don't deal with masters.
Yes.
I have people that I do work for, I do work with. I don't have a master.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you brought up the term self-mastery. And that's the master that we fuck with. Really what we're talking about, and Kris, if it's different for you, let me know. But for me, it's a practice. What self-mastery means is that I am present with myself as myself, and I'm making decisions not from a space of those old habits or those patterns. That will happen, but far more often what happens is that I am making the decision from a very present space, because I have tools and practices around me that allow me to know that I get to lead myself. I'm really talking about this practice of knowing how to lead myself in ways that are affirming for me and not taking away from people that I care about or value.
Self-mastery for me means having complete ownership of who I am. That's shifting who I am. The person who I am, that's not the same person that you met an hour ago, because I found out something different, or I thought about something and realized, that's a problem. That bumps up against something that I said before was a principle that I believed in. Mm-hmm. Why doesn't this circumstance work? But without the other voice, whether that's a physical person or in my head, another person saying that you can't hold two spaces like that. It doesn't work. But if I'm shifting at some point,
I am going to be. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So the idea is not just to have the 2 points and sit in it. The idea is to have the 2 points and go in a direction. At some point, you're going to be both.
Yes.
Right? Until you get more information about who you are. Not about what other people expect from you, but when you get more information about who you are as a person, then those decisions get easier to be made. You say, "Oh, I'm no longer that. I'm this now."
Yeah.
Right. So.
Absolutely. This episode has so much to offer. I think so many discussions can spin off from this. And going back to that, originally I talked about the first 100, that project. I think this is a good segue into that, because this episode is going to spark different things for different people. You know, different people are going to hear it and focus on the thing that is most present in their lives right now. And I want to make space for people to do that with all 100 episodes and to share it, right? So I have changed every single page from episode 1 to episode 100. Every single page will now allow you to comment on the page. What I would love for y'all to do, and please share this aspect of the podcast if this is something you get value from, go to the episodes. You can go to raisingfreepeople.com/archives to get all of the episodes. Go to the episode or episodes that really resonated with you and share why. Share why, and also share like a related resource if you have one. If you say, oh, as a result of this, I got this book, or I found out about this blog, or I wrote this thing as a result of that, and it's connected and y'all should see it. Whatever the thing is that came up for you, whatever resource, whether it's just from your own personal experience or someone else, something else you found out about as a result of that thing, please share it. Because what I'm going to do is, and this is the second part of the invitation. So the first invitation is for you to go to the pages of the episodes that really resonated with you by going to the archives, and I'll put that link on this show notes page, and to comment and share. Oh, this book would be perfect for what they talked about in this episode. This blog post would be great. Or here's what I really liked about it. Okay, that's part A. Part B is I am assembling a group of people. I don't know how many of us it needs to be. I'm assuming like 7 or 8. I don't know. A group of us who will get together and really farm those episodes. We're going to list out all the resources that people shared. We're going to list out all the points that people had. And I'm going to create a section of raisingfreepeople.com where you can go through every episode. It'll be like you can search it. You can see, oh, I'm only focused on right now. My problem is my kid is still in school, and what can I do? Because I still want to figure out how to raise a free person if they're in school. There are other people on the podcast who have said that it's doable. And if that resonates with you, then you won't longer have to like figure out or imagine, where to find that information. You'll be able to just do a search on that page and it'll tell you, okay, these episodes speak to that. Here are some resources related to that. That's what the first 100 is about. Taking every conversation and turning it into an even deeper resource. I'm going to be sharing a lot on the Fear of the Free Child Instagram account about this first 100 because that is my focus. I will not do season 4 until that first 100 is done. Whatever it looks like in the end, I'm completely open to that, but I'm very clear that it needs to happen that way. The episodes are helpful for folks, but it needs to be easier for people to get the resources from, whatever the term is for that. Because some people don't want to binge all 100 episodes. I don't know why, but there's some people who don't, and they shouldn't fucking have to. They should be able to get what they need from it. And I want, and I will facilitate that, but I really don't want to do it myself. So if like you work for Google or one of those places or whatever, and this is easy for you, holla. And thank you for that terminology. It's going to be indexed. Thank you, branding guy. Kris is my branding guy, by the way. People talk a lot about like the look of the site and, the different things that I share. And this is who is behind that work. Thank you so much for being that.
Wait for the update.
Yes, he's talking now about a new site and all of that. I'm excited. So, yes, it's going to be fully searchable and all those details. And I'm super excited about that. So that is coming up in between seasons 3 and 4. Another thing that is coming up are some transcriptions. So for example, when I was doing because I wasn't just doing the training, I was also getting training. It was so dope. But at the ALF summer training, I had a really good conversation with 2 sisters. They're based in Puerto Rico. And it was, Anna and Mariana. And they really went in on how deschooling is such an important part of the work that they are doing in PR right now and why they know that that's liberation work. But I did it in the dining room during a time when a lot of people were talking. And even though I've done audio like that before, like at the Liberation and Education Summit, and I thought it would turn out like that. And I didn't do like a test listen. Y'all, the shit is inaudible. You can't hear them. So I did that and I sent it to Juan, who helps me with editing. And he was like, yeah, nah, can't do it. So I'm going to have it transcribed. So if you do transcribing services and you're willing to offer me like an awesome rate on it, it's like an hour conversation. Please reach out to me. You can reach out at raisingfreepeople.com or you can email me at she@akilasrichards.com. I'm going to transcribe that because it was so good. And I'm going to put that out as soon as it's available. I'm not going to wait until season 4. So those are 2 of the big things that I'm working on in between, as well as being on Patreon a lot more often. Like I want to do like 2 or 3 times a week to really engage folks who took the time to put me in their budget. Love it. And I support folks on Patreon too, so I know the commitment that takes, and I really honor it and value it. So that's what's happening in between seasons. Also, I will be next year. I told you about some of the things I have going on October and November, but next year I am aware of some things, and I won't go into details because they're not finalized. But when they are, I'll definitely be sharing that on Patreon, and then some of them a little bit on Instagram. I know that there's some potential gigs coming up in around training and this whole work of raising free people, obviously, in Texas, in Louisiana, in Georgia, and New Jersey. Those are the 4 places that I know about. And we will be back in California because we love it. And we now have people there that we just love so very much. And we'll also be back in Arizona for the same reasons. Folks we love, doing work we love. When I was in Tucson with Lane earlier this year and that tribe of people, I just got so much out of it and was able to really give and offer things in a way that I want to do more. So those are the things that are coming up. And if you are in one of those states or you want to do the work and want to talk about how that can be facilitated, either with me or just you doing the work and wanting some insight, please reach out. That's it, y'all. Thank you so much for listening and being here. I know this is a long ass episode, and I don't do long ass episodes as a rule anymore at all, but this one called for it. I appreciate y'all very much. Folks who listen, folks who send me good vibes, folks who bring me out to a space, folks who bring the energy of this work into a space who I've never met. Even if you've never reached out to me, I feel very much energetically what is happening in the world. And I feel so good about playing a tiny role in it and being a part of all the people all over the world that I'm getting to learn more about now who are doing this work in their way as well. Thank you so much for what you do. You help to shore up my family's work because I'm inspired by a lot of you just the same. And I love y'all, and I really value the space that you have allowed me to co-create with you.
I would like to thank your listeners as well. They've been really good to you and us. Yeah, and I see the shift in you as a result of doing the podcast. So
all good things. Much love and appreciation. I will see you probably sometime next year. But, there's lots of other ways to stay in touch. All right, y'all. Much love.
Fare of the Free Child is a weekly podcast that centers
diverse narratives, insightful commentary,
learning with our children and deschooling ourselves, owning our multiple identities and treating children with dignity,
creating community and sharing conversation from often silenced spaces,
breathing life into liberation practices proactively and on purpose.
It's about parenting. It's about self-directed education, loving. It's about learning.